Welcome to a new episode of Into the Metaverse. I am so excited to finally host someone from Decentraland, and there's no one better than Yemel, who is the executive director of Decentraland. And in today's episode, we're really going to break down what is really Decentraland, what it enables developers, brands, creators to accomplish, why Web3, why now, and hopefully together, Yemel, we'll answer some misconceptions that folks might have about the platform you guys are building, its structure, and also some of the misconception and the negative sentiment around crypto. So we're going to unpack all of that. But first and foremost, I'm really intrigued, and I know a lot of people are going to love to hear, how did you get here to be building Decentraland, to be the executive director of Decentraland? Tell us a bit about your journey into this category.
Hey, John, thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to tell my story and the Decentraland story as well. So, if we go back, I studied software engineering in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I started my career there, working in the tech sphere, working for e-commerce startups, become a CTO at the age of 23. At some point, I realized that Argentinian market was kind of a limit. I was looking for like other horizons, and then I took some time off, and that's how I found Bitcoin. That was 2013, so more than 10 years ago. Maybe you hear that Argentina is a funny country, pretty interesting. When I was a kid in 2001, our government seized all the bank accounts of every Argentinian. They exchange all the dollars we have in our accounts into pesos at the exchange rate that was not fair at all. And they didn't let you access your money. So I think like crypto and Bitcoin for Argentinians makes sense super quickly. And I realized that was a technology that has the potential to change our country and the world. Maybe in the US that you have already a financial system that is super solid. It takes you some time to understand the power of crypto. But if you came from Latin America or any other country in the world, self-custodianship is like a very powerful tool. And I believe that's actually the future of many financial institutions in the US. They are, once they reach the top of the US market, they are trying to figure out how to expand. And self-custodianship is really a powerful tool to go international. So that's how I get into crypto, 2013. Start working remotely for American companies first. I end up working in developing open source software for creating like transactions, wallets, indexers, like technology in the crypto space. And then I totally fall in love about open source. And that's one of the biggest values that we have from the internet. Like I believe the internet won't be what is today if we didn't have these open standards, the spirit of collaboration and the capability to take the innovation from one person, one point of the world, and expand on it, take your own spin of it, and actually contribute to the code base that millions of people around the world are using to build their own software. So we were sharing an office with a big group of friends, each of us like taking our steps in entrepreneurship. Some of them building on Ethereum, others on Bitcoin. And during this sharing this space, having many lunches, we have many conversations about the future of the technology, how we can use blockchain for other applications. Back then, Ethereum was just an idea, like maybe they have like their initial white paper, but not necessarily have their chain launch. And we were really into science fiction. We like, of course, books like Ready Player One, Snow Crash, and we discuss about gaming and what's the social contract in gaming. Like you as an owner, you can never really have ownership like of your assets, digital assets, and that really plays a limit of how much are you willing to build in a digital world. If there is a company, a middleman, someone who is the owner of the garden, and you just are borrowing your life there. They can change the rules at any time. They are like capturing more than 50% of the revenue that is made by creators. And And if the technology is going to the direction we were seeing at that time, like the ultimate computing platform is not the mobile phone. Like we believe that technology will continue evolving into a more immersive internet. And if that's the case, I don't want to be living in the internet that is owned by one private company, and I'm just borrowing my digital life. That's the kind of movement we're seeing on the internet. The centralization of all the applications, all the content is like in a silo, and a company can change the rules at any time, prevent you from accessing your assets or just removing your account. And if you are heading into this spatial new version of the internet, it should be built on open standards. It should be built on a better foundation. So as a society, we can continue building, and there is no high ceiling on how much are you willing to spend, because there is no single company, as there is no single internet company. It's more like an industry. So I think those were the values that sparked the innovation on Decentraland. Early versions of it were like a small prototype in a Bitcoin blockchain. Like we fork Bitcoin and created our own blockchain to track the record of who owns what plot of land. That was before NFTs existed, actually. If you go to the definition of what is an NFT in Ethereum, you will see Decentraland as an example of the applications. We contributed to that standard. So we were there in the very early days. I contributed to the project till 2017. Then Ari and Esteban took the lead on the development of the first beta version of Decentraland that was released in 2020. I think that was a really exciting year for Decentraland. Being there in the public on the 2020, on the like 1 year getting ready for the pandemics, actually. Like the beta version is out there, and suddenly the whole world was getting like locked up and looking for new ways to connect with other people, to engage socially. So I think like there was a perfect timing for launching a product. For sure, Decentraland was not as ready as we all would love. Like it was a beta version, but definitely we have like a crazy amount of users, crazy amount of parties, brands coming on, and I think the what we learned from that experience is how people love to connect. That's I think human nature. And for some people that are pretty far from a city, or they don't find a like a clique or community that share their same interest, internet is a perfect way to connect, to overcome maybe some social anxiety, to explore different versions of yourself, or actually if you are a creator, have the capability of affecting the world you are investing your time on. And I think that's one of the biggest values in Decentraland, that all the world is user generated. Like if you get into the metropolis of Decentraland that is called Genesis City, you will find a huge space that is built by the creations of different people that are adjacent, like next to each other. So Decentraland is pretty innovative if you compare it with other platforms, because we have this concept of that you have a full world that you can traverse. We have foot traffic in Decentraland, and while you are going to a place, for example, you know that there is an event in like one of the main plazas. Along your way, you will find so many interesting things, and that spontaneity, like the capability of finding something that surprised you along the way, I think it's pretty unique from what we are building, and try to resemble real life in that sense. And it's not only the world that is user generated, the way you customize your avatar as well. And that's a big opportunity for creators. Like a big chunk of our community have become creators of wearables, because I think they are like self-taught, like lifelong learners. And when they find they have the capability of like building their own clothes and actually sell them in the marketplace, and retain 97% of the revenue that is generated from there, like that's amazing. So that's kind of my story on how Decentraland started. rejoined the organization like as executive director of the Decentraland Foundation 1.5 years ago. I think was on the end of this craziness of like pandemic metaverse hype and trying to lead a new version of Decentraland. Like we felt that the timing was right to start building a new version, the one we'll continue building for the next 5 years, 10 years. Yeah, a change in leadership was needed for that. So yeah, have you heard about the founder mode? So I to spear that effort and super happy about it because after a year and a half, we're launching a new version of Decentraland now. So super excited of what is coming next.
So we'll talk about that in a second and deep dive into what you guys are launching next. But I wanted to kind of piggyback on one things you've mentioned, and I think it's pretty clear that there is a common theme on two things you've mentioned across your life ever since you were a kid. One is the implications of a gatekeeper, someone who controls what happens, either if it's in tech or the shocking example that most people probably are not aware of what the Argentinian government did in 2001. Just imagine Americans waking up one morning and the government basically take all of your dollars, change to a different currency, and you have zero control and you can't touch it, you can't take it out. I think unless you've been through that experience, it's hard to grasp why self custody is so important and so interesting, and why it's not going away despite of what people might think. It is true that it's especially the case in emerging economies where there is unstable financial systems and unstable governments. And I think, many countries are going through that. So that's something that is really important to make sure that people, oh, wow, because everyone has been looking for a use case of why self custodian is important and wallet is important and Bitcoin is important. And there is a lot of merit to that, especially given the example you've shared. And then the second thing you've mentioned is open source, which is kind of go hand in hand with having control of your own destiny. But that's really more about collaboration. And it is no surprise listening to your stories of how open source and having control of your own destiny kind of led you to be a part of open source projects and Decentraland. So thank you for sharing that. Now, let's switch gears and talk a bit more about Decentraland. And I want to reset Decentraland for a second for our audience. Ignore what you think people may or may not know about Decentraland. I am hearing about Decentraland for the first time in my life. What is Decentraland? What's its purpose? Why is it so exciting and why now?
Amazing. Yeah, well, so starting from the very basics, so Decentraland propose a virtual world in which you can create an avatar, choose your digital identity, and jump in. You can customize your avatar like with your name. You can pick like the color of your skin. You can be like a boy and a girl or something in between. You can go shopping for the clothes that represent you, or like start exploring the world, jump into a party, meet new friends. Maybe they will give you some clothes if they see you on the very default avatar look. So Decentraland is about like an expanding world in which has so many people on it, and you can be whatever you want to be. Like if you want to be an explorer, you can go and chase different art galleries. If you are a DJ, you can find the next party to perform and explore that artistic part of you. Maybe you're like a creator of like some kind of digital art. So maybe if you go and talk with the gallerist, maybe they give you like a day so you can expose your creations. If you have a birthday party and you want to hang out with some friends that are not in your city, you can do a party in the center as well. So it's a place for your creativity and self-expression.
It almost sounds like a open source virtual always on Burning Man.
Exactly, exactly. Actually, you mentioned Burning Man, and we draw heavy inspiration from Burning Man. Like the second prototype of Decentraland came after we traveled to Burning Man, and we were like, "Oh my God, this is what we have been talking about. Like this is what humans can create if you have the good a really nice context for it. So yeah, I think there is a lot of burning man in Decentraland.
And who is really using today Decentraland? Who are the people who are using it, and who are the people that are creating on the platform?
Well, I think Decentraland points into very different segments. The people looking for connection and belonging would be like a huge group. As I was mentioned earlier, being able to connect with other people that they think like you. I think that's a big part. The world is pretty crazy, and in many cities or towns, some people they don't feel they really fit, and they are looking for like another group of like-minded people. And Decentral is a really nice place to find the community you belong. The community really helps each other in whatever different matters. For example, if you are a DJ and you want to perform, you will get many invitations to do your art in Decentral. So I think that's a really important use case. Then we have many like 3D modelers and like artists who wanted to build interactive experiences, and Decentraland provides you with a pretty amazing tool set for creating an interactive experience. Like just from going to Blender to a game, like you have so many things that you have to do in between, like networking code, like rigging avatars, like so many things in order to actually having an interactive experience. Like in Decentraland, most of those batteries are already included. So you can create like a pretty interesting scene just by 3D modeling and connecting a few cables. So you can go beyond 3D modeling into building interactive stuff. So I think that's a big appeal of like the no coders creators to be able to express themselves.
And to
Um,
clarify, it's all the creation. Is it correct that all of the creation of assets or interactive experiences does not require any code or scripting capabilities, or is there also a version where people can use scripting in order to build things that are more complex?
Yeah, so we have the very advanced version of it. We have an SDK, a software development kit, in which you can code using TypeScript. So if you know JavaScript, probably you are pretty set to start building in Decentraland. But we also provide like no code versions for you to drag and drop the few models and some smart items, so you can get your scene running pretty quickly without coding. But if you want to go like on the hardcore stuff, you can like do web requests and program your game. Like you can go very deep.
I'm curious if you had to kind of describe how those two things break down from creator percentage. Like, is most people creating on the no code level, or is it more equal? I'm just curious how many people are building with the no code capabilities versus people who are using the SDK.
I think like most of our like very highly engaged creators are on the SDK part. Like they want to learn how to go deeper and start building like for example their own game. I think the no code version is like the early steps. It's the gateway for like building your own private space. Maybe you start with a template, you drop your NFTs, for example, to showcase your friends the things you have, and that you can do it that with no code at all. But like if you really enjoy like doing your own build, that's when you jump into the SDK, and I think that's the biggest tool for now.
Now, naturally, and I'm switching gears now, naturally, as these, let's call it, I call it all kind of just part of the 3D internet. So,
Hmm.
as we think about the evolution of a 3D internet, naturally, we've seen massive platforms emerging over the last 5 years. Roblox is one. UEFN introduced new capabilities to build stuff on the Fortnite ecosystem. And we have others, smaller, but they're in existence, right? Anywhere from Genies to Zepeto, et cetera, et cetera. In all of those cases, it seems like brands are playing a really important role in driving attention, awareness, and commercial opportunities to the developer and creator ecosystem. How does Decentraland think about the role that brands play in the evolution of the ecosystem around Decentraland?
Well, yeah, brands are really important for us. They drive a lot of attention and new users to our platform. So that's why we are interested in partnering with different companies from so many industries, and we have so many big names in our list to mention. We
What are
tend to
three
organize.
what are three examples that you feel like people are going to be like, oh wow, I didn't know brand XYZ did an activation in Decentraland?
Oh my God! So Dolce Gabbana, Netflix, Tommy Hilfiger. Like we have some many brands from the fashion industry building around the Metaverse Fashion Week. That's a big event we held once a year, and we kind of showcase what is possible to do with fashion in this kind of digital world. So I think that's a really interesting use case for fashion brands. They can convey their message and their aesthetic in novel ways, actually going beyond physics as well, showcasing that like digital world can also be pretty innovative. We have also a music festival in which we bring different music artists. We have people from Ozzy Osbourne to Dead Mouse and Paris Hilton, and that's I think more on the mainstream side, but also giving the opportunity to like more indie artists. I think that's what kind of resonates with our brand and why we're building this. So I think like building these umbrella events that are like massive with many brands is a really good vehicle for the brands to jump into like a bigger narrative, and also for like our users to have a lot of content in like 1 week. So that's the vehicle for us. The other part is we have some interesting experiences in Decentraland, some sort of mini games that engage users and reward them by like navigating the world and going through those challenges. Some of those challenges are branded, and we provide brands like the opportunity to build a game and include it in this path for the new users, or to brand a game that already exists that really fits what they are about, right? So I think in that process, what they are finding, and probably you have that experience as well in working in Roblox, like maybe the a brand, they don't choose Decentraland for the total views. It's not about the total number of views, because in that sense you go to traditional social media or paying for an ad that lasts 10 seconds. I think that what they are looking for is like the engagement time, like how long a person is willing to engage with our brand. And interactive experiences really can like knock down the standards of a person is willing to cope with interacting with the brand. We have like in the central like 30-45 minutes of engagement time with an
It's almost
interactive.
like looking at it instead of cost per impression, it's almost looking at it almost like cost per minute of engagement, right? Which is a
Mhm,
really
exactly.
new theme, I think, for brands. And we're seeing it with Roblox too, right? It's like the value that brands get from those minutes of engagement. It's a different story because in social media it's just pure impressions, right? No one really counts the views, even though it's okay, but that depth of engagement. So it's interesting that that's a key KPI that is really important from brands on the central end.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And also the our community that is pretty strong. They also remember. They remember the brands that did an activation on Decentraland, and they are super eager to see them like coming back and doing something more recurrent. We have the case of Absolute. That's a brand that, yeah, branding alcohol is kind of hard. It has its challenges around the world, and doing it in Decentraland, they find a really interesting way to approach it. Is they did a party, super fun. It's aligned with the values of the brand, and the community was super happy to have them. Also, they really engage with the community, giving the opportunity to for like local DJs, performance during the party. So I think that having the capability not only to bring your own audience to a more innovative medium, more immersive version, but also to engage a community that is also pretty active in our place and exposing to the brand. I think that's a nice thing to do. It has the potential to create like strong memories in people.
And I imagine that, but I would love to hear from you. I imagine that one of the things that the Decentraland is really strong at is it's really more aged up communities, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. If we want to,
what is the
yeah,
typical age range of people who are on the Decentraland, to your understanding?
yeah. Well, we don't have all the data because we don't. In many cases, we don't have it. But our audience is adults from 25 to 45. Like it's a wide range. Since
I'm
we
still in the
started
range.
on, yeah, I think that's the biggest difference with like Roblox. Like the Roblox is solving a problem for the kids, but mostly for the parents. Like they not only have to build a product that interesting, engaging, like a platform for people like you that has a studio to create and monetize on it, but they are providing a solution to parents, a safe place for they can leave their kids to engage with other kids online, and I think that there is a lot of value in building that safe space. We are more open in that sense. We are like everyone is older, and I think it has a more adult appeal. Maybe it's because we came from the crypto space originally. Maybe one of the misconceptions for Decentraland, I think that something that you mentioned is that you need to have a wallet, you need to be crypto savvy to use Decentraland. That's not the case anymore. Like we have social login. If you have a Google account or a Twitter account, you can just connect and
Did you
actually
hear
still
that?
be
You don't need a wallet to become a user or creator on Decentraland. You can also use traditional legacy forms of internet connection.
Yeah, exactly. Even though, like, if you start investing in your digital identity, you will still be owner of those assets. Behind the scenes, there's crypto technology being used to secure your ownership, but that's something we deal about, and you don't have to really be a
Yeah,
tech savvy person
the
to.
important thing for users, which I think is also the key message for the future, is most people around the world are never going to know what blockchain is or how it works. What they will know is that they are using a platform where they truly own their virtual assets. And if something happens to this platform, they own it. And if they want to move to a different platform, they own it. And I think one of the terms that I care about the most about the future of the internet, which is also one of the words that are hardest to pronounce, is interoperability. And so I'd love to hear from you how you guys are thinking about the importance of interoperability for the future of the internet, and why
Mhm,
Decentraland, especially being an open source platform, is so
mhm.
unique.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting point. So interoperability, I think, can we can talk about this on so many levels. If we go on a technical level, like being open source is about letting other people to continue expanding on your product or your platform. For example, and we haven't talked about this, but in Decentraland, there is a big community fund that is managed by the community that invests in projects from the community. So a few years ago, someone wanted to build like a satellite view of Decentraland, similar to like a Google Maps application on web, and they request a grant for the project. They received it, I think, was like $5,000 to build the initial prototype. And they took the Decentraland code base, they modified it, they took the camera, put it on the top down position, took a picture, move it to the next plot, took another picture, and continue doing that for the whole world. And they built like a Google Maps version of Decentraland. And that was totally permissionless. They didn't require our permission to do that because the code is open source. And actually, as a community, we have an incentive for encouraging creators to go and tinker with our code base. So I think that's an interesting experiment on how you can experience Decentraland through other kind of platforms created by the community. So that's, and nobody's stopping someone else to go and create a mobile application for you to chat with your friends in Decentraland. So I think that's the spirit of being open source. Like we can spark innovation across the globe and build something bigger that just one company can do. So that's one part. Second part is how we can interact with the digital assets from other parts of the ecosystem that are not Decentraland. Imagine that you have an NFT collection and you have your own community. I don't know if it's the penguins or the animal you want to pick, but it's an engaged community. They have a digital asset that recognizes the membership to this community. So we have mechanisms for you to represent that digital asset into Decentraland as like a wearable. You can have like a hat with the penguin. You can have like shirt of the penguin. So by this, what we're trying to do is giving tools for external communities to feel their belonging in Decentraland. They can again throw a party, do a gathering, and they are not regular avatars. Like you are part of the community, you already belong. So I think like being able to leverage the IP and the asset already on internet, that's part of the interoperability as well. And I can continue talking. For example, you can export your avatar in a VRM format. So if you want to use some kind of like motion capture software to use your avatar in a call like this, like I could be using my avatar here and like talking with you. And I think that's another important part of if you are building and investing in your digital identity. What are the freedoms that you have to take that digital identity and use it in other platforms as well? We are super interested on that as well.
That's really cool. So, I mean, this is important. So for example, I have an NFT community or whatever, let's call it, I have a community. and I think this is part of the problem why there's just so much antagonism around names, crypto, NFTs. So I have a digital community and that community has certain digital representation, right? In the form of virtual cards or whatever that is. Decentraland can be essentially a 3D persistent solution for how my community can bring their virtual cards, NFTs, and pretty much automatically that can that can manifest itself into 3D virtual assets that represents our community in Decentraland. So maybe a T-shirt or a hat, as you said, or a hoodie or a jacket.
Mm-hmm.
And then automatically overnight we have kind of our communal representation graphically, not just because we gave it a name. And
Mm-hmm.
all that happens without any effort. We can just do it and come into a virtual world in 3D and build sort of our own persistent, a living community.
Exactly.
Okay. That's cool. And it's almost like, especially because it's open source and it's interoperable and it can be integrated into everything. In order for quote unquote a metaverse to emerge, it has to be open, it has to be interoperable. And one of the challenges I think that we're facing today is that the internet was not built for an interoperable 3D environment, right? The protocols maybe are there,
Yeah.
but they're not yet fully connected. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of efforts being done by companies like Apple. But what you're telling us is, hey guys, what are you talking about? Here is a open source platform that is on the web. Sure, you can also download the client and you can do all of those things. So what are people missing? Why are people not paying more attention to Decentraland?
Well, we yeah. Once we like 1 year and a half when I get into this role, we took the hard decision of building a new version of Decentraland. We have some like hardcore learnings about like what is missing in Decentraland. And I think that's one of the answers to your question of why people is not paying too much attention of Decentraland. The first one that we want to solve is like the performance of Decentraland. I think like the older version of Decentraland was kind of slow. It has some glitches. You cannot see that far away. And the graphics, we when we build the web version of Decentraland, we have to cut many corners in order to be able to run on a web browser. So this time we want like for a different path, like the new client we have releases super performant. It can let you see very far away, like until the horizon you can see the buildings. So I think like we're being able to convey the vision of Decentraland way better on aesthetic and performance level. And the second part I think is on the engagement side. Even though the value proposition of you can be whatever you want to be, like you can do whatever you want, go figure out yourself. That's pretty much life, you know, like
Can be intimidating.
yeah, a little bit. You have to like make your own choice and yeah, and follow the rabbit there. And I think that's something that we're changing this way. That path of choosing your own story in Decentraland for sure will always be there, and I think that's the interesting part of Decentraland. But we are providing many quests and mini games and like some engagement mechanics for a new user to start exploring Decentraland and getting to get the grasp of the different parts of the ecosystem, while along the way you start meeting people, making friends, and eventually you join a community. So I think the top part of the funnel of a new user engaging into Decentraland is way better in this new version. That's our biggest bet in onboarding new users, because the core of the community, the ones who are already engaged, and actually the ones who goes to the elder game, which is the governance part. Because like if you are an active member of Decentraland, you start realizing like there is something that you don't like, and maybe can we make a change? Like and there is a platform or a governance platform in which you can engage and actually vote and have a voice and actually propose a change that is actually implemented in Decentraland. But that's very long, very far along the way. So I think those two things are maybe at some point we're pushing people back from Decentraland, and I think this is a really good time to go back and check Decentraland, because you will find a different experience.
So, where can people today access the new version? Where is it available? What platforms? What devices?
Well, the new version is available for Windows and Mac. You can go to decentraland.com, .org, sorry. You can go to decentraland.org and click on the main call to action and then download the client for either Windows and Mac. It's already available. Looking forward to extend to another platforms next year. Mobile and VR are the two we have in our goal. Probably in January we'll release like the roadmap for the year with all the details. But I think it's a really exciting time for the space. I don't know how you feel it, but we have so things, and if I compare it from like a decade ago when I jumped into the space, for example, blockchain, even though it has their ups and downs and like cycles, the technology is pretty proven. Like it's have been online for like a decade. We have financial institutions deploying institutional money into the technology. So I think like at least Bitcoin and Ethereum are here to stay for a long time. And as you said, this is the rest of the industry is understanding that a regular user doesn't need to understand that part to leverage all the benefits of the technology. And I think that pieces are getting together. The other part is GPUs, and the computing power is getting like more powerful every day, and that's not only because of the gaming industry, which is also uh, growing and growing and growing, but it's also on the AI side. I think the funny part of AI is that they are built using the same chips we use to render virtual worlds, and like all the money that is being invested in AI, it's being invested in making also more powerful chips that can render 3D as well. So I expect to see an acceleration on the computing capabilities.
And naturally, AI can amplify creativity and human augmentation. in creating things on virtual world platform. I think it's going to play an incredible role to amplify creativity. I don't envision AI, at least my opinion, as, oh, it's going to replace creators and art teams. No, I think it will augment creativity and allow people to do more faster, bigger, more beautiful. And that's what I think is exciting about it.
Yeah, totally, totally. That's the twofold of the AI. One is like the hardware, as I was mentioned, but the second part is what you mentioned. That is giving the capability of a regular human to be able to translate their thoughts into like a 3D space. I believe like LLMs or like these kind of AI tools are amazing translators. They won't replace our capability. You need to give some sort of input of what you want to do. And actually, I think the craftsmanship of like using AI is about giving the right prompt, right? Being able to use the right concept, the right words to give it feedback. And now the AIs have mastered text. They have mastered sound. 3D models are not so good. I'm following closely, but it's getting better and better. Maybe in a year would be like like a 3D model that is performant enough to put it in a game and distribute it.
Yeah, it's gonna
But I
it's
think
gonna it's
that's
gonna happen.
that's the panacea. That's the Pandora box. The moment in which you can say like, okay, I want to create a living room with a sofa. I want to have a lamp in the center with a waterfall coming from the top. And that is like generated immediately. I think that's so super powerful.
Yeah, and putting motion into it, right? So it's not only 3D,
Hmm.
it's pretty much 4D, right? So it's a 3D object with emotion. I mean, it's going to take time, to your point, but it will create almost like a whole new wave of renaissance of creativity that I think we don't really know yet what it's going to look like. Um, I want to go back to your earlier point. Look, my belief is really simple, which is what I'm excited about. The reason I'm doing all this work on the podcast and with Super Social, and what I believe should be for future generations. You know, I have a 3-year-old girl. I want to make sure that the internet is going to be an incredible place for them to experience. I think it has to be more immersive, it has to be user controlled, and it has to be ethically governed. And if you look at those three things, the internet is going to have to be a different place for those three things to exist
Hmm.
together, because that's not how the internet is built today. It's well guarded by gigantic platforms controlled by big tech, publicly traded companies that are printing money on the back of users not having control. And just imagine if Facebook would have given a fraction of a percent of rev share to users for the content they created for free, and would give them a fraction of a percent of rev share on the advertising revenue they've generated. Just imagine. Just imagine,
Yeah.
right? But that's what the internet could be. And I
Hmm.
think that's a big revolution, and it will take probably longer than we think. But being more immersive, which means, by the way, it's not just immersion. It's, to me, more immersive means it's more social. So it's more social, and it's more open and user controlled and ethically governed. So it's not controlled by one individual. These are the things that I think are worth fighting for.
Totally. I'm so glad you put it in those words because are pretty fundamental to the vision of what Decentraland is about. Yeah, definitely in terms of immersiveness, we I think we are going that way. Like I think there is a trend, a motion from technology and the internet to be more immersive. It started as like static pages to suddenly being able to create content and post it online, then get receiving reactions, and that's asynchronic content. Then we went to live, like with Periscope, and now we have like so many spaces that you can have a live conversation. And I think the next step is embodying presence, like be a Google Meet or like the platform we are using to record this. Some sort of presence is conveyed here because I can see you, I can see your facial expressions, but we know there is another layer to that. We know, and I think many companies are pushing and deploying capital to build the next step in online presence, and I think that's a trend that will continue. Regarding being a place that you can really belong and feel that you are part of, and you are not borrowing your place there, like being ethically governed. I think that those are fundamentals that we need to go back, because this is not a new idea that we're like some crazy people in 2024 are thinking about a socialistic version of the internet. No, 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 no. This is how internet was born, and thus this is are the fundamentals. And maybe it's a cycle, like humans go from one extreme to another and then come back. We can see this in like on, I don't know, left and right waves. I think like technology going to a more centralized version of walled gardens has some network effects, some has some maybe advantages to on the capitalist part of the world to keep doing and pushing that away. But we'll start seeing another, I think, coming back to this version, and you can see that fight in the, I think, the VR space between Meta and Apple. They are kind of having this push. You can see the same push between Android and iOS on the early days. You can see that as well between Windows and Mac. There is a more open version that is willing to operate with so many partners on different hardwares. And then you have the very verticalistic approach of doing business, that you have a very close ecosystem that works pretty well. Two different approaches, and I think that the battle that is being fighted right now, or at least on the spatial computing space, on the VR space, how you want to call it, it's that fight. Is Meta trying to be more open with this, like open sourcing their operating system, wanted to push for interoperability, having like the cheapest headset you can get out there with like really top-notch quality, and like Apple being Apple, and who is going to be the owner of the marketplace of the apps and the distribution. I think that's the fight they are playing. On our side, I think like we are an app in that ecosystem that it's not only about the technology, it's about the people who adds value and create the virtual world we can encapsulate there. And like a percentage of all the economic activity that happens in that virtual world is captured by Decentraland DAO, like the governance part of Decentraland, and that's reinvested in the growth of the platform, and trying to keep the most of the revenue and going back to the users and the creators. So I think that's what you mentioned is the vision of why Decentraland has a future, and why we're still building it.
Yemel, this has been phenomenal. I think we're going to have to do a part two at some point, and after I get to
Amazing.
spend a bit more
Anytime.
time on the client and the app and playing. But I've learned so much. I'm sure folks have learned so much. I'm really excited to check the new iteration of Decentraland, and I know it's still early days for the platform. But thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to part two.
Thank you so much, John. It has been a pleasure to be here. Looking forward for the second part as well.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Into the Metaverse. We hope you learned a lot and explored new aspects of the metaverse.